And we're back. What is going on, people? We are Tottenham TV, back here for another panel show. We have got a star-studded panel for you today. We have got Mr. Brian Daigle, Tottenham on tour, on a hiatus, but coming back very, very soon, I believe.
Coincidence, a protest has been organised on the day Brian Daigle is on a panel show? Coincidence?
I don't know. Apparently, flights are booked. He's on the way. But Brian, how are you, my brother?
I am very good. Delighted to be back on a panel show with you two and Sean. Obviously, you haven't spoken to or seen for months. It's good to see him. We may have wildly different views of ownership and other things, but it's always good to see him. Yeah, there is no coincidence, is there, Sim, that protests are arranged and somehow I get a call to join a panel show. And delighted to speak on it. And yeah, flights aren't booked just yet. Not yet.
Yet being the key word there.
Even if you're not there in person, you'll be there in spirit. That's fair to say.
And we got Sean Butler, Spurs Talk Show TV. How are we doing, brother?
I'm good, mate. Good to be back. Good to be back. Brian, Sim, Ben, hope everyone's well. Sorry about the laggy internet thing. Obviously, there's always a challenge with me with this stuff at the moment, so I hope it's not too bad.
Seems all right.
Step in the right direction, Sean. At least we can see your face this time.
Yeah, that's probably not the best thing for most of your audience that don't want to see me too often, so it's fine.
With the wonders of AI these days, you can never be too sure, but I'm sure that is surely.
Yeah, soon just some Korean is going to start coming out of his mouth. All right, let's get into it, because there's actually quite a lot to talk about today, and we are not blessed with the most amount of time, but I want to get into these Romero comments from yesterday first and foremost, and if you guys think it was right for Romero to come out saying what he did. So let's just, for context, read out the quotes. And he says, "The truth is, I would say no comment. But Man City competes every year. You see how Liverpool strengthens its squad. Chelsea strengthens their squad. If one doesn't do well, they strengthen again. And now they're seeing the results. Those things are... Those are the things to imitate. The last few years, it's always been the same people responsible at Tottenham. Hopefully they, the Tottenham hierarchy, realise who the true responsible ones are. And we move forward because it's a beautiful club that, with the structure it has, could easily be competing for the title every year." So initial reactions on the comments, and do you think it was right for Romero to come out saying basically what he has done? I'll start with you, Sean, on this.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any problem with him saying what he wants to say. I think that, it's okay to do it. I think that it should be free to speak your mind and not be held accountable or held be prejudiced against you. We live in a world where free speech is supposed to be at the cornerstone. So I don't think there's any issue with him saying what he said if that's how he feels. What I would argue though is what like anything in life, it's always nice to be able to get the inside track from people that have access to maybe detail that we don't have. Everything that we see, everything that we're told is all hearsay from someone else's mouth that doesn't know the truth, and it's always kind of diluted and all that stuff. So it's nice to know someone's truth, but that is all that it is, right? At best, it's someone's truth. It's not the truth. It's their personal opinion. And I think that what you have to therefore do is scrutinise what is their incentives and motivations for saying what they said. And it was only a couple of weeks ago we spoke about Hugo Lloris, and I'll take the same stance with Romero's take as I do with Hugo. Like, it's very convenient for people who are directly employed to provide value on the pitch that justifies their salary, and when it doesn't happen, to be able to point fingers in the direction of someone that largely doesn't explain, doesn't complain, gets on with the job. And for me, it comes back to, like, in those particular quotes there, that particular sentence, like, if the club, I forget the specifics, but he said something like the club is structured in a way that allows us to compete every year for trophy or for the title, right?
He said in the way the club is structured, we should be competing for a title every year.
Right, okay, so on that basis then, if the guy who's truly responsible is Daniel Levy, if that's what we're inferring, then the guy who is truly responsible by the logic of the reason why we can't win a trophy every year is because the players aren't good enough. Well, they have been good enough to get us into a position over the last 25 years where we have the audacity to challenge for a title every year. If that is if the club is set up to be able to provide that, then the same guy that he is pointing the fingers at as not delivering enough is also the same person who is responsible for delivering enough to get us into that position. Because before he came along, we weren't competing for titles every year. We were finishing, 15th.
Oh, I think we lost Sean there for a second.
Is he coming back?
Sean, we've lost you.
Some seasons 10th, 11th. We were an average team in the Premier League.
Is he back?
I'm not sure what's going on there with Sean, but I guess he was alluding to that Daniel Levy has got us to a point where, we have been considered as title challengers, particularly under the Pochettino reign. The way I look at it, let's get into Brian first, then we can get into what we think. But Brian, what's your kind of take on that, on what Romero's saying?
So do you know what? I'm actually glad, because I was going to mention it, that Sean mentioned the Hugo Lloris one, because I was in the studio with you both when we did the Hugo Lloris thing, and obviously when I first heard it, I did what I do and go heavy on. Here we go. It's someone calling Levy up, brilliant. But when you do take a step back on it and you look at, like we said, like Sean mentioned and like others mentioned, the way his career ended was bitter with Hugo, with what happened at Newcastle. He went down. Was it a player just lashing out? Now he's gone and we didn't win anything, and he's well within his right, but it wasn't as clear cut as I really thought it was when you take a step back. This one I think is different. Yes, we know he's calling out, and Sean just mentioned about Levy having the players, and we have been able to compete, but not wrong there. We have competed, but then when we've had the chance to compete, we've then fallen away. When we're at our top, when we've been at the top and really ready to push on for that, not just be in the mix, but seriously be in the mix, we've dropped back and we've regressed, and then we've rebuilt again, and then we've sold them and we've gone back. And we've lived in a world recently where we've wanted the club to be more communicative, whether it be Lange or Paratici, whether it be Levy, whether it be Munn, whether it be the manager, whether it be whoever. But it's never really fallen on the players, because we just don't think it's going to happen. They use their social media for what they feel, and so do broadcasters when they get these snippets. And I think it's refreshing to hear a player talking about it, in all honesty. We all say it, whether you agree with where we are as a club and what the main problem is. Obviously, people know my stance very, very clear where I stand. But this is a current player talking about it. And not just a current player, part of the leadership team, the so-called leadership team, a World Cup winner, a Copa America winner, someone who plays. I heard you, both you and Sim talking about yesterday, Ben, when you were saying he goes away on Argentina and plays with the creme de la creme, and then he comes to Tottenham, and unfortunately the kind of players aren't around that he plays with of that elite quality to win. So I think I'm happy he's come out and spoken about it. I really am, and I wish more players. And I'm not just talking Tottenham. We all want to hear more about our football teams and what's going on. And I think it's refreshing to hear Romero come out and say it.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. And I guess back to what Sean was saying. Daniel Levy. Whatever criticism or praise that you want to give him, from where the club that he took over back in 2001 to what the club is now, is a completely different kettle of fish, right? We're on a different kind of stratosphere to what we were fighting on back then in the 90s and early 2000s. Having said that, you look at what he built and where we got to in the Pochettino era. Ever since then, it's been nothing short of a shit show since Pochettino left the club, which is the reality. And he's got to take a lot of blame on his hands. And I think I agree with you. I think it's a breath of fresh air when you hear players, particularly of Cuti Romero's stature within this squad, coming out and talking about that. He clearly feels like the team need more and the team need to progress year on year. And I feel like he doesn't think that's happening, and that's a clear indication of the blame pointed to in that direction of the hierarchy.
I got
on, Sean.
just quickly, yeah, just quickly. I don't know how much how much I was talking to myself or before I cut out. But
It cut off when you said before Levy came, we were finishing between 15th, and I'm sure you're going to say 10th or something.
yeah, right, yeah. So obviously, yeah, Ben's point summarised it there. Like, obviously, we have made leaps and bounds forwards. I do 100% agree with Ben and with Brian that I think it is valuable to hear these insights from players, because I think that it's nice to be able to get access to their opinions, but I think you have to treat them and scrutinise them for the motivations of why they're saying what they're saying, similar to Hugo Lloris. I do think that there are, not agendas, but there's opportunities. It's human nature to sit there and say, if I'm part of the system that is paid a hell of a lot of money to be able to reproduce success or to find it, then if it hasn't happened, if it's reasonable to expect the success to be there and it hasn't happened, then is there any chance that I can point a finger in a direction that doesn't land it with being my fault more than I think it is? Because everyone's going to find a reason to back themselves and to justify their own efforts. And I think that, with the Levy thing, yeah, for sure, there are massive amounts of mistakes. And I do agree that there's been a regression in the last 5 years. But what I would also argue is that the biggest relevant factor as to why we haven't had success is the same reason why Aston Villa hasn't had it, Nottingham Forest, Everton, everybody apart from the 5 teams that have won 90% of trophies since 2001. And of those 5 teams, it's 2 teams that have won 70% of them in Chelsea and City. And what is the common denominator there? Not that I think common denominators are, the rational kind of excuse for explanations of things that are very complex in nature. And football success is an incredibly complex bucket of variables. But for me, that Abramovich, if anything, is the person that spoilt the broth because he got in before there was any kind of attention given to money in football, set themselves up, spent money, had a different approach to profitability, a different relationship with money, and went about it in a way that then allowed others to come and do the same. And then they try to close the door after the horse has bolted, which essentially protects that top 5 more than it does help them. And the guys that came in Chelsea's case after the fact with Bowley, they had this very unique opportunity to take advantage of the circumstances with the Russia thing, where they had to sell and write down debt of £1.5 billion, and that allowed him to kind of throw that money into the investment bucket by hiring clever lawyers to find wiggle room. And ultimately, that £1.5 billion he would have spent anyway on a real valuation of Chelsea that he didn't have to pay because of the Abramovich situation. So this notion that Daniel Levy is responsible for everything within Tottenham, he of course is a massive influence, and he's made bundles of mistakes, especially in the last 5 years. But is he ultimately responsible for the lack of trophies? I would argue that when you're listening to Christian Romero, if you want to look insularly, then he takes a share, but so does Romero, and so does all the other players that are paid a fortune to provide it. And we are better than where we are currently. Our squad is far better than where our current position lies. And so it's like everything in life, the blame should be a pizza pie. Everyone gets a slice, depending on the size, is depending on your take on how influential Levy is.
I would say yes. I would agree with you that the squad is a lot better than what it's showing right now, and we should be probably around 5th or 6th, looking at the squads in the Premier League right now. But when you look at the regression that has been shown since Pochettino and since having one of the best teams in the Premier League, and over the course of 2 years, best goal difference, best goals scored, least goals against, best defence in the league, like. The squads that Romero has been part of have never been built for success. That's the reality. And when you're looking at what Christian Romero is saying, that's what he's alluding to. And I don't see why, he's wrong in what he's saying. I think his statements are completely factual. And one of the big reasons why the squads haven't been built for success since that time, since Cuti Romero has been at this football club, has got to be down to the hierarchy. I don't know who else it could be down to.
Again, it comes down to like how big of a gap was there between what we had and what success looks like. And if he's talking about lifting the title, then the gap was massive. Right, because the people that were lifting the titles were the beneficiaries of the Sheikh money or the Russian money long before the rules came in. They set up the multi-club ownership. They had all of the kind of ecosystem put in place that allowed them to become masters of that ability to deliver constant success. If you look at the transfer policies of Manchester City, though, there's loads of mistakes in there. But it's a common denominator that mistakes happen in life. If I get out of bed every day and I make less mistakes than I'd make good decisions, then it's a good day for me. So this idea that you have to be infallible or flawless, I think is a stretch. And I would also say that the gap between where we were when Romero joined and what we need to be to deliver constant success was a big one, and one that can't really be found if you're living within the rules. And I don't think that Daniel Levy should be chastised for expecting the Premier League to adhere the rules as they see fit or create rules that are supposed to be fit for purpose. And we've seen with the FFP and the City debacle and all of the other things that they go after the low-hanging fruit like Everton and Forest for minor infractions, but they leave Chelsea well alone for doing crazy things around hotel loanings and third-party lending, sponsorships, and what Abramovich was doing with his ex-PA. All of that stuff was beyond the realm of the lawyers at the FA to be able to figure out. And I think that that's almost blaming Daniel Levy for coming second in the Tour de France to Lance Armstrong and blaming him because he didn't cheat. I think that you have to at some point hold some of the other parties accountable for why the gap is what it is. And it's not because it's been a level playing field and Daniel Levy's just made more mistakes than everybody else. It's because the dice has been loaded and the table has been slanted in certain directions for far too long. And that stuff isn't acknowledged enough by people that are angry with Daniel Levy.
Sure, let me just
go on, Brian.
Let me just say one thing what I will say that, where you raised some good points, what I will say, it's all well and good using Chelsea, Man City, Liverpool, the money that Spurs don't prepare properly. They lose Kyle Walker, sell him for 50 million. It takes 5 right backs and 100 million to find the replacement. You sell Harry Kane for obviously, I'm not getting into that, but he's cut the route. Where's a world-class striker? Or you're not going to get near Harry Kane, obviously. But there have been plenty of opportunities where rebuilding, we as you know, the Kyle Walker one I always use, it was actually the Irish Hotspur that said it, but you look at it, we spent over £100 million to replace a £50 million player. And we've done that over the pitch so many times. That's not Chelsea, Man City, Liverpool's fault. That's bad recruitment. That's on the recruitment team.
100%, mate. 100%.
It's all, we can say, like you said, Chelsea and Liverpool, Man City, they have all the money in the world, and Manchester United, the revenue they pump, obviously is different to what we've had in the past before the game changer. But there has been shocking recruitment.
100%.
There has been shocking hiring and firing from Levy, direct, the whole way down. So it's 6 and 1 of half a dozen the other way you look at it on that way. Sorry, Sim, that's all I want to say, bro.
Yeah, all I was going to say is I think Romero's just commenting probably, obviously before he's come here, I don't think he knows the in-depth history of Tottenham and how they've done and everything like that. Obviously, he knows we got to a final and he probably is aware of the Pochettino team, but obviously he's probably not aware of the minutiae of what we are in terms of what Brian's talking about. We didn't replace this guy, that guy 5 years ago, whatever it is. He's probably just commenting on what he has seen since he's come to the club. And since he's come to the club, he obviously came under Nuno. We sacked him after 10 games. We brought in Conte. We were going well. And then, Conte wasn't given the full backing probably in that second summer in terms of really improving that back line. It wasn't really set up to progress. We then ultimately he ended up losing his job. We now got Ange. Clearly Romero says he likes Ange, and clearly it seems as at the moment that the squad are behind the manager. They like the way they play football, and then in the summer we didn't do enough to really improve the squad and push on, and we only really got Solanke. So he's probably sitting there very frustrated with the situation that he feels like apparently he didn't like Conte, but they finally got a manager that he says he likes, and apparently the playing staff are behind. Yet they probably feel like they haven't been given the full tools to push on from last season, and given this injury crisis, they're relying on teenagers to come in, do jobs for Spurs when they're looking at Chelsea, who are bringing on Madueke off the bench, are bringing all these players, and that's who they want to. That's where they want to be. They want to be up there competing with these kind of teams. They want to be up there challenging for big honours. And I'm sure what you're saying, Sean, is absolutely right. When it comes to, we can't blame Levy for not cheating and all that kind of stuff. And there has been financial dome from City or Chelsea, but these players are not. They're not accountants. They don't really care about that stuff. Yeah, and these players just see the playing field and feel like we're lagging behind because of where we are with the squad. And I think another interesting point of these quotes is, first of all, do we think this is potentially him coming out with these kind of quotes as a pretense to engineer a move in the summer?
100%, mate. That's what I mean. Yeah, what's the motivation there? You've got to scrutinise why they're saying it, who's saying what, and why they're saying it. If they're an insider, and with Romero, there's a lot of reason to think that there's some manipulation of what. Yeah, sorry to interrupt. Carry on.
No, it's fine. I think I am going to pose it to everyone. Do we think that's the case? And also, obviously Romero's saying this. I doubt he's saying this as a lone voice in the squad. I'm sure they will discuss this kind of thing, and I'm sure that this is probably a common belief in the squad, amongst the squad as well. So could this belief permeating within the team be leading to a loss of belief, not potentially in the manager, but in the club itself, within the squad? And that's maybe why we're not seeing the results that we should be. Could that be part of the problem? Go on, Shawnee.
Look, I mean, it's a reasonable take, right? But I think that, just for what it's worth, I think that Romero is massively overrated for what he actually delivers versus the level in which people perceive him to be because of his resume carrying a World Cup. I don't think he's one of the top defenders in the world like people thought he was going to be. I think he hasn't materialised. And look, if he wants to disappear, if he wants to go, I'd be the first one to say for the right price, it will take advantage of the reputation that exists about this guy that doesn't really match up to what we see as fans, in my opinion. And I would happily sell him for the right price if we had confidence that we could go and get a player that's a better fit for this system. And there's plenty out there if you're gonna stick with Banj. But in terms of the wider point around, is there potentially some sort of murmurs around, being at Tottenham Hotspur, you're going to be the bridesmaid but never the bride because of the gap between those that have and those that don't? I think it's plausible, but look, at the same time, how many of our squad realistically are going to break into the Manchester City team? I'd argue not many. How many of them are going to break into the Chelsea team right now? I'd argue not many, but for what it's worth, we were all laughing at Chelsea last year because they were so poor. But where they are now, what they're starting to deliver is absolutely the bare minimum of what you should expect when you've dropped £1.5 billion in 24 months on some of the best young talent out there. Now, in terms of if there is a concern around, are these players all talking about, are we ever going to win anything meaningful as a Tottenham player? Probably not. Then there's two things I'd say. One is, well, how many of these players, as I said, are going to be able to get a command, a role in a team that's more likely to win? There's only 5 of them in the Premier League, and probably in other leagues, there's usually less than 5 teams that win anything anyway. So how much opportunity is there out there to have more consistent success? And I think that's the biggest part to remember here, that success in football is unusual, right? If you are the average team, you don't win. You very, very rarely win, ever, right? So this idea that a season without a trophy is failure, I think it's a very strong word to use. It might be black and white to some. I think it's a shade of grey for me. And I would argue that there's other players out there that we could always attract a lot of good talent to Tottenham. It's about what Ange says, and I completely agree with him on this note. I just don't think he necessarily backs it up with what we see on the pitch. But he thinks that the difference between the best, at the very best, and the level just below it is not technical, it's mentality. Right, and that it's about your willingness, your ambition, your effort, your adaptability, the presence, and you can have an argument and go again. All of those little things that you can't really judge an 18-year-old on because they haven't really developed their brain yet and they haven't gone through the temptations of early success and see how they get through it. So I don't understand, first of all, why Ange is such a big dominant force around mentality and then is okay with a transfer policy where you're basically buying potential, not proven resilience. That's a bit of a concern for me. But on top of that, if he is such a mentality monster driver, then really the team that we have, they are good enough technically, but all they've shown so far for me is a lack of willingness to get the job done. And against Chelsea, which was a big litmus test to see where we stood, we kind of fell apart in the second half. And that to me shows that whilst we do have technically gifted enough players, I don't think we have the mental side of it. And those players are not going to do well enough at Chelsea or City or anywhere else if they really think that Tottenham aren't going to create success. Are they really going to get in a place in the better teams? I don't think so.
Yeah, but it's the model, right? It's the model in which we work with that won't bring success, and it won't ever bring success. You look at, forget Man City and Chelsea for now, right? Man City and Chelsea are a bit of a different kettle of fish, but just look at Arsenal and Liverpool, right? In what the same stages as they were in our projects or when we had Pochettino. Liverpool, when they were knocking on the door, when they needed extra investment, when they needed to push on to the next level, they went and bought the best in class in the positions that they needed. They went and bought an Alisson, they went and bought a Van Dijk, they went and bought, I can't remember who else, but top players in those specific positions. Pardon?
That wasn't with chairman money, that was with club-built money.
But they weren't exactly successful, Liverpool, at that moment in time.
No, but they sold the world record player, right, for 120 million quid.
We just sold Harry Kane for 100 million.
Right, but they didn't need 19 players, a 22-man squad rotation done in 24 months. They only needed a couple of players to fill into an otherwise steady squad that was pretty much foundationally solid through a wonderfully resilient youth system and a good setup around them.
Salah and Mane didn't cost 100 million.
Since when Klopp came in to Klopp's actual team that he started winning stuff with, it was completely different. Like, it was a whole completely different squad. You're not talking about just one or two players. I'm talking about when they just wanted to kick on to the next level.
But how long?
It was about
how long
2
did that
years.
What I'll add to this, Fred, because we've gone away from Romero and onto money, and it's amazing when I'm on here how it gets to Levy and Sean, how we get to Levy so quickly.
Well, Romero brought it up.
So you look, you look at it. Sean just mentioned before, if we got a fee for Romero, Romero goes. Yeah, I don't trust Tottenham Hotspur to find the right defender first time. I don't expect them to spend all the money. You can talk about, we can mention Liverpool, and Sean's right with the Coutinho money. It was Coutinho 140 mil, bang, bang, but they did that. We don't. Arsenal, if you want to talk about the filth, the one that really irks me and gets to me is Arsenal didn't have Champions League for 6 years, and all of a sudden they can smack down 100 million for Declan Rice. With no Champions League money, none of the concerts, none of the events that we do. Yes, there's the debt, whatever. That's the difference. And again,
Brian, you can't skip over that part, though.
No, I'm not skipping over that.
Yes, there's the debt and whatever, but yes, there is the debt.
No, I'm actually going back to defend you and say they only needed one player and they went and spent it, but they got that money without having, but without the concerts, but the money that's coming in. Yes, I understand there's debt. I don't dispute that, but when Arsenal haven't had that revenue that we've had come pumping in with Champions League money as well, they've gone and spent £100 million on a Champions League player. When we were in the Champions League, did not sign Champions League players. We bought players that can play in the Premier League. There was no Champions League elect standard player that we signed with the revenue that we brought in. We again went quite, and you're right, Sean, we needed a massive rebuild. There is no denying that. But I've always said, if you're going to buy a few lumps of coal and hope they turn into a diamond, you need a couple of diamonds in there to show them the way.
Right, but isn't that part of the process, though, Brian? Isn't that like, let's be honest, of the squad now versus the squad when Ange took over, or in the last part of the Conte era, think about how much Deadwood we had on loan, how much we're trying to get rid of, how much of the part of that removal of the old we're through, and we've gone after these youth players. Obviously, you're not going to get everything right with the youth approach. I don't personally subscribe to. I say it every day. Like, we've got more 18-year-old talent than the hub, right? It's too much of an expectation on these guys to be able to carry that weight of expectation that Tottenham fans hang on every single manager and every single player. If the pendulum's gone too far in one direction, both managerially and the philosophical approach, and also the age profile. To me, you do now need to drip in some experienced leaders. But I would argue that, the idea of when was the £100 million player going to happen, I don't think it's possible realistically to expect them to do that whilst also filling 7-8 players in every window where you can, or every summer window where you can. Let's hope that the majority of the youth that we've got does mature into the players that we paid the value for, right? The Bergvall at 10 million, when you compare him to 40 million or whatever it was for Archie Gray, let's really hope that you're paying for a guy in Archie Gray that does have the minerals to cut onto that next level. But if you do, if you get most of those right, then in a summer's time where you don't need to buy 7 players, you only really need to improve here and there, like what Liverpool were in back when they signed Alisson and Van Dijk. I think that you should then be able to expect all of this concert money, all of this, distribution of responsibility of revenue generation away from Tottenham fans, all of that stuff, which should be applauded, by the way. There's not another chairman in the Premier League who gets as much revenue from sources that are outside of their own fan club than he does. But all of that stuff should be able to put us in a position where when you only need 1 or 2 players, then you can spend 100 million quid. And
wasn't that the case in the summer, though, Sean? Wasn't that the case in the summer just gone?
No.
If that wasn't the case, then why did we fill the squad with 4 more 18-year-olds and 19-year-olds and 1 Dominic Solanke?
Because we still need even right now, we still need a left back cover. We still need a goalkeeping replacement at some point. We still need a left-sided centre back. We still need a number 6, and we still need a left winger.
And we needed them in the summer, and they didn't come in.
But that's what I mean. But you can't you can't spend £100 million on 5 players. So if you're doing it on 1 player, then you're going to have to like sacrifice somewhere else. And at the moment, it's a case of trying to elevate the kind of, when the tide rises, it lifts all ships. You're trying to elevate the general basic level of the squad, which I think has been achieved. And I hope that at some point in the not too distant future, we'll be in a position where that you don't need wholesale changes every summer. You only need 1 or 2, and then you hope that this financial Goliath that the stadium has become should put us in a position to be able to compete financially with the Arsenals and the Liverpools and everybody else. If it doesn't happen, then obviously I'll be very critical of the whole process then. But right now, I think that it's still we haven't got to that position yet, personally.
I mean, do you not think we should be in that position already? Like, the stadium, I know we're paying off the stadium still, but it's a very long-term debt with short payments, low interest every single year. You're looking at the money that we're spending. We're spending a lot of money, but we're not spending it right, in my opinion. And then still you're looking at the wages compared to the people that we should be fighting with, everyone that you've mentioned, Arsenal, Liverpool, Chelsea, Man City. Chelsea and Man City, obviously financial powerhouses, but the other two, they're on almost double the wages that we're spending. Aston Villa, probably around the same amount of wages that we're spending in terms of per year. Do you not think that we should be doing more than that?
I mean, it's an argument, but I don't think of the total squad cost spend is the way you should think about it. You shouldn't think about it in, I know that it's distributed out that way for the purposes of like consumption for those that don't necessarily want to understand it in detail. But having a 50% of your revenue spend on salaries is actually beneficial for many reasons. But you should ultimately think of if you can do it, you should be ultimately thinking about the distribution, the dilution of those numbers over the course of the contract, including the bonuses and including agents' fees and including the transfer spend. And it gets more complicated when you do it that way. But when you do it that way, we're actually far more like the difference, the gap that you're talking about that exists in salary caps and salary spend is not anywhere near as vast as you think it is when you bake in all of the other variables that come into your squad cost ratios. And the gap is far closer. Now, is there an argument to say we should be spending more money? Yeah, if that is truly the difference why we can't attract a player that we want. But I don't remember. Can you name me? I mean, I'm not saying that there aren't. I just can't think of them right now. But can you name me 3 or 4 players that we have realistically had the opportunity to sign that we lost out on because we didn't pay the guy as much money as the guy that did buy the player
Sure,
in the last 12 months?
I can flip that the other way and say, is there a single player since we've moved to the stadium that we couldn't have signed at White Hart Lane and put on the wages? Because yes. I don't think there's a single player that Tottenham Hotspur.
Every single player that we have, right? Mate, we were spent in the 5 last years, the last 5 years of our time between 2015 and 2019 at White Hart Lane. We were spending £15 million on average per season. Net spend 15 million. We're now spending 110. That's a 5-fold increase in our net spend annually in the 5 years since versus the 5 years prior. So this idea, when people say we were promised that the stadium was going to be a game changer, it has been a game changer in our ability to spend money. The only thing that has happened at the same time is ridiculous inflation in the value of the players. Archie, £40 million 10 years ago would get you a top 20 player in the world. Now it gets you an 18-year-old who happens to be English or happens to be homegrown and who hasn't kicked a minute in Premier League football. That's not the owner's fault. That's not Angie's fault. That's not the player's fault. That's just the reality of the situation. But to suggest that the stadium hasn't been a game changer in our affordability is just factually inaccurate, mate. I'm sorry.
Well, you're the finance guy. I've never claimed to be whatever. I just don't see transfer fee wise and wage wise, especially wage wise, because it's gone down, a single player that White Hart Lane couldn't have brought in. Like I said, I'm not going to get into financial details and the things you've shared because you will.
You're talking about quality of player. You're talking about quality of player.
Exactly. That's what I mean. Not value, quality of. Yeah, that's the thing. I've never claimed. Listen, I stand where I stand when it comes to this football club and this ownership and whatever it may be. And I've stood firm, and I never will. And I'm very, very hardcore when it comes to how I feel about the ownership. And I look at the football pitch, and like I said, I don't think quality wise or whatever. there has been a player that's come to this football club since we moved to that stadium that White Hart Lane could have attracted.
Well, I mean, look, we never know, right? We're playing kind of playing
Devil's
imagination
advocate.
here. But I don't listen. I don't disagree. People always think because I'm defending one point, I'm therefore defending every point. I'm not sitting here saying that I think Daniel Levy is a perfect chairman. I absolutely acknowledge that he has made a shed load of mistakes, too many, right? Loads and loads of mistakes with regards getting involved and nitpicking over this, and his negotiation style is not great. He thinks it's brilliant. I think a zero-sum game is a terrible way to negotiate. I very, very, very much hold that against him. I also think that he has the wrong risk appetite to be a football manager. I've said this 1,000 times. People only hear the fact that I don't necessarily agree with all of the Levy outtakes, and I find that there's inconsistencies in the logic of them, which is all I'm really doing is trying to find logic to the consistency. And if there isn't some, I'll call it out, because I think that it's imperative to find balance. It's necessary to hear both sides of the argument, and I don't think it's well represented in most other parts of the community. So I try to bring a different side, but that doesn't mean I think that he's infallible, nor do I think that he makes every decision the best for the club. And I 100% agree with you that when we've gone left, we could have gone right and spent the same money and the same wages and got plenty of better players that worked out. And it's not even playing Monday morning quarterbacking, because a lot of the time we all are and have had consensus, all of us, that a certain player would have been a great fit to a Tottenham team. And then we went elsewhere, got someone that didn't work out, and that player did end up going to a different team. Kudos is a great example, who smashed it at West Ham. There's plenty of examples of coulda, woulda, shouldas, and I'm happy to acknowledge them. It just doesn't mean that every part of the Levy out argument is consistent and makes sense, because it doesn't. And there's a lot of misnomers, inaccuracies, and misunderstandings of the things that happen outside of the club that don't get the attention. And I just think it's worthwhile hearing those things occasionally, so that the audience can have both sides of the coin to consider. That's all.